This is WFYI News Now. It's December 20th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, hundreds more Indianapolis students will have automatic admission to Indiana University Indianapolis. Indiana's local public health funding program generates nearly $100 million. And the city's teeny Statue of Liberty Museum will close at the end of this year, but it might find a new home.
We've had people from all over the world. We're on our second guest book.
Those stories coming up, but first, the next installment of our regular segment called The Checkup from Side Effects Public Media, where the health reporting team explores a single question sparked by a recent news story or maybe by one of our listeners.
1 in 5 adults have a mental health condition in the United States. But each year, over a third of adults with severe psychiatric disorders are misdiagnosed. Women and people of color are even more likely to be misdiagnosed in the medical field overall. So why is it so difficult to diagnose mental health conditions? That's the Checkup's question for today. I'm Lizzie McGreevy, Community Engagement Specialist at Side Effects Public Media, and with me today is health reporter Elizabeth Gabriel.
Hey, Lizzie.
Hi, Elizabeth. All right, learning and behavior disorders are supposed to be caught at like elementary school, right? So then why are people not getting diagnosed until they're full-grown adults?
So it's normal for young people to be scared of things or get sad and anxious sometimes. These things may not need treatment and will pass. But parents and teachers are not trained to recognize when these may point toward a mental illness. Listen to what Leslie Holvershorn told me. She is the chair of Indiana University Psychiatry Department.
How in the world would we expect parents to know how to diagnose things or teachers to know how to diagnose things like this? They're not trained to do that. So you have to come in contact with a trained mental health clinician. And most people just never come into contact with someone to get a psychiatric assessment.
So a parent would have to seek out psychiatric help if they have these concerns. Even if they want to do that, finances can be a barrier. Plus, there's still a shortage of psychiatrists, which means it might be a while before someone is actually seen. That's why 1 in 7 kids who have at least one mental health condition don't receive treatment.
So then there's this idea of how we define specific mental health issues versus those normal behavioral problems. For example, I hear all the time that if someone is hyperactive, then they definitely must have ADHD, especially when we're talking about boys.
Fun fact, that's actually just a stereotype. For example, if a boy is more hyperactive and runs around a classroom, they may or may not have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD. And symptoms for things like ADHD can present differently in different people. So just because someone doesn't have more noticeable symptoms of hyperactivity doesn't mean they're not there. That just means they're able to mask or hide them better.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But, I've also heard some people being diagnosed with one thing, and then years and years later, they're diagnosed with something else. It sounds like maybe there's a lack of innovative technology in play here. Is that correct?
You're right on the money, Lizzie. Scientific advancements in mental health aren't far enough to where we can diagnose mental health conditions using technology like MRI scans. Medical providers know that certain amino acids in fat cells create gene codes in the brain when someone has a mental health condition. But there isn't technology that can say, hey, if you have X% different from someone with a baseline of certain gene codes, then you definitely have depression. On top of that, a lot of mental health conditions have overlapping symptoms. So if you compare ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, they can both show signs of difficulties concentrating and sleep disturbances, but they can have different treatments. It can be easier to diagnose someone if they have one or more severe mental illnesses that come with symptoms like hallucinations or delusions.
So what needs to happen so that it's easier to diagnose these mental health conditions?
Like many problems in the world, this also circles back to money and resources. Holvershorn at Indiana University also said it takes a lot of patience, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, for researchers to be able to study mental illness. Without that, it's harder to develop future technologies to diagnose mental illness by, say, looking at a scan or a diagnostic test result. and every disorder is different. For example, bipolar depression is different from major depression. Only around 1 to 2% of the population has some of these mental illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So even though it's a lot of people, it just makes it more complex to carry out these studies.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for this great information. And, while we all wait around till it gets easier to diagnose our mental health conditions, you let us know if you have questions you're too shy to ask your doctor, maybe some health hot topic that you're wondering about, or if you maybe just want to know more about some TikTok going viral that's talking about health. And in the meantime, stay safe.
That was The Checkup by Side Effects Public Media. Side Effects is a regional health reporting collaboration of NPR member stations across the Midwest, based here at WFYI. Hundreds more Indianapolis students will have automatic admission to Indiana University Indianapolis beginning with the 2026 school year. From WFYI's Education Desk, reporter Dylan Pierce-McCoy has more on the program expansion.
IU in Indianapolis is adding new schools to a program that grants automatic admission to local high school students with a 3.0 GPA or higher. The initiative began this year with students from Indianapolis Public Schools, and it is slowly expanding. In the 2026 school year, students from several additional charter schools and township districts will be eligible. The new districts include Lawrence, Warren, Pike, and Decatur. More than 450 seniors qualified for automatic admissions next school year. I'm Dylan Pierce-McCoy.
Just 3 initiatives under Indiana's significant local public health funding program generated nearly $100 million in savings for the state. That's from a new report evaluating Health First Indiana. The state invested $225 million in the current budget for local public health needs. Prior to that, counties received just $7 million a year from the state. A report from the Fairbanks School of Public Health evaluated prenatal care, blood pressure screenings, and fall prevention services made possible by the new funding. And the research shows that just those key areas generate $95 million in savings, whether by preventing healthcare treatment needs or premature death. Department of Health Commissioner Dr. Lindsay Weaver says the investment isn't just about health either.
It's an investment in our education. Kids who are healthier perform better. In our businesses, right? We know that businesses, when they look to move to communities, they're looking at the health of that community.
Governor Eric Holcomb says for the program to really work long into the future, the investment can't stop now.
It's real, it's lasting, it's permanent in each local community, each of the 92 counties. And the good news is the local leaders, throughout the state understand that this is the right path.
Lawmakers funded the program at 75% of what the governor had initially asked. And for our final story today, Indy's teeny Statue of Liberty Museum will close at the end of this year. As WFYI's Jill Sheridan reports, an agreement is in the works to move the collection to a new home.
The Teeny Museum has operated on Indy's Near East Side for more than 6 years. It's 50 cents to see the collection of over 650 pieces depicting Lady Liberty in a tiny storefront room. Tim Harmon spent 45 years acquiring the pieces, and word spread.
We've had people from all over the world. We're on our second guest book.
Unexpected health problems have forced Harmon to put the building up for sale. News that the museum would also have to find a new home reached Robin Knopp. Her son made a donation to the museum when he was young.
And that's really how I started really falling in love with all of the unique and interesting things.
Knopp has agreed to take ownership of the collection donated by Harmon. A local developer plans to donate space at the newly renamed Factory Arts District to house the Teeny Museum. I'm Jill Sheridan.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Monday.